Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar called Introduction to Tendering. Today I'm going to go through the whole process of how to find tenders, where to find them, how to write your tender, talking about your organisational capacity and your ability to be able to hopefully win a tender. So we'll just make a start. So just a little bit of information about me. Importantly, I've been a procurement manager, so the advice that I'm going to give you today is looking at it from the perspective of someone like myself who is on a selection panel and looking to award a tender. So I've got academic and professional experience in procurement, and I've also sat on the side of supporting and helping businesses to write tenders to win government and other type of work. So I will send you a copy of this PowerPoint presentation at the end. It's quite detailed, the information. I deliberately do that to provide you with good information that you can keep for future tenders. So just a little bit about Business Station there. I won't go into too much detail on that, but do take advantage of the services that Business Station offer small and medium businesses. The ASBAS Digital Solutions Program, it's a federal government funded program to provide advice and assistance to small business, and I've been a Business Station advisor delivering this program since 2014. So today we're going to look at what is tendering, so the whole concept of tendering, other terminology and the like. We're going to look at how you can find tender opportunities through digital and other platforms. Look at the process of writing your tender. So deciding to write the tender in that, are you ready as a business to actually tender? Preparing the tender submission, so the actual process of sitting down and writing your submission. And then once you've delivered your submission by the closing date and time, we'll look at how tenders are assessed. So that's sort of my role as a member of the selection panel. I'll outline sort of that sort of basic overview of that process. Then we'll look at management systems. So demonstrating your organisational capacity. Then we'll look at some how your practical application of that, and then we'll finish up. So it'll go for about an hour, and if you've got any questions, just put them in the chat box and I'll answer them, and alternatively I may be still getting to your answers. So welcome aboard, and let's get started. All right, so we're on the slide there. What is tendering? So I'm just going to brief overview of what it is. Now, you've probably heard of different terms. You have bid, proposal, that sort of thing, quotes and the like. I'm using tendering as a catch-all term, but it really is a structured invitation. It's a formal process. So the buyer is going to the market to look for suppliers to supply goods or services, and so they'll prepare a document. They'll have a scope of works or a specification, or have rules around the tender process. They'll have rules around the sort of information that you're to provide. They'll have a series of questions for you to answer, and you need to develop that response, including your pricing, by and deliver that to the tender box by due date and time. So from your point of view as the bidder, it's a process of you submitting your offer within that finite deadline. And from a buyer point of view, it's looking to encourage a greater pool of prospective suppliers in order to select a preferred supplier from. So, excuse me. In terms of the tender process, there's some terminology that you're going to come across. Expression of interest, generally a two-stage process. The first stage is about identifying a preferred supplier list. And pre-qualifying those suppliers that you'll need to meet a certain criteria. Once that's determined, then the second stage is to actually engage a supplier for the supply of those goods or services through the predetermined process, with the tender process. Request for quote, RFQ, generally lower dollar value. I mean, can be verbal in writing, so it could be within the buying policy. Ring up and get 3 quotes for something worth $1,000. It could be something worth $100,000. In state government in WA, for example, anything over 250,000 is regarded as a request for tender. It has to be publicly advertised. In local government, anything over $150,000 is a tender and has to be publicly advertised. So other terminology, so request for tender, generally large scale procurement with a high dollar value, but importantly the scope or the specification is clearly defined, so the buyer knows exactly what they want, and then you need to frame your bid in response to that clearly defined scope or specification. The other option is a request for proposal, RFP, so again procurement of varying dollar values, but the scope or the specification is not clearly defined. So they're seeking a solution to a problem from you. They want to do something. I mean, a design and construct type contract is a good example where they're wanting to build a building and they're looking for design concepts as part of the tender process. So just be familiar with those terms, because that's going to determine the type of tender process it is and the type of response that you're going to provide. For those of you that have joined us late, I am recording this as well, and you will receive a copy of the PowerPoint presentation at the end of it. So that's just some terminology about tender. It's important that you understand that terminology, because it will crop up in various advertising that you come across. So now we're going to look at finding tender opportunities. So there's various websites that you can access to get tenders, whether they be local government, state or federal government, whether they be private industry tenders. So, and I'll show you those websites, but you need to register individually for those. They are free of charge. You can subscribe to receive email alerts when tenders that meet your criteria are released, and you'll get an email advising you of that. In relation to local government, you need to go to the respective local government website and look at their tender process and register individually with those. Importantly, you need to be proactive in the tender. It's very hard to win a tender going in cold. So, if you're looking at, say, local government as a prospective client, then build that relationship. So, because not every tender, as I mentioned earlier, is necessarily publicly advertised. It could just be they're ringing up and getting quotes for a smaller job at $10,000 or something, or it could be something of, say, 50 or 60,000 that they're just going to go to a predetermined list of suppliers. So contact the organisation, ask to be put on a supplier register. Also connect to them via social media platforms, because often they advertise their quotes and that through those mechanisms. I know I've picked up tender opportunities through LinkedIn and Facebook and the like. So very important to build the relationship, get on a supplier register, get them to know who you are and what you can deliver for them. So digital platforms where you can find tenders. So in WA, Tenders WA is the major state government portal for all procurement, and that covers all state government agency procurement. So again, you can register free of charge for this. Department of Finance manages tenders in WA. So that website that I've got there does have details about the procurement process and how government manages procurement in WA. So it's a useful website to go and have a look at. Federal government or Commonwealth, AusTender is the portal there, and they've got a separate portal for IT and communication procurement. So again, free of charge to register. What these portals also have is not just tenders that are currently released to the market, but also prospective tenders that are coming up. So, for example, with AusTenders, you can subscribe to an email that tells you when planned procurement. So there might be tenders coming on the market in 3 months' time, and you'll receive a notice to that effect. And the useful thing about that is if you know that there's a tender coming up that's relevant to your business that you'd like to put in a bid for, you can at least start planning early to fulfill that or to make a submission. So private tenders, national projects, so gateway.icn.org. So you can look at registering your details for all sorts of tenders, predominantly sort of in mining and construction type projects. 360 Providers Portal, that's a national platform. I've got no association with these, but these are private industry portals that some organisations use. I know local governments in WA use this as well. Some use TenderLink and some have their own platform, so register for that. Vendor Panel is another one. And in WA, the WA Local Government Association, you can register your supply details with them. So you need to be proactive, register for these sites if you're in WA. In Western Australia, traditional media, so in the West Australian, on Wednesdays and Saturdays, they advertise local government tenders, anything over 150,000. So it's actually as part of the Local Government Act that any tender has to be publicly advertised in a newspaper circulating in the state. So we've only got one paper, that's the West Australian. So have a look at that on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And if you're involved in construction, then a lot of the building companies who are tendering for government work are advertising for subcontractors. So there might be opportunities there for you as well. And have a look at national and regional newspapers as well. Now, even though I've just given Western Australia websites and federal government, you, regardless of where you are in Australia, you can register for these sites as well. So, you know, if you're based in Queensland and you want to tender for work in WA, well, you can do that and register for those websites. So, for people in other states that have joined us, digital platforms in Queensland. So they're the Queensland platform. So they've split that up into general tenders and then construction. And again, you can go to the Commonwealth Government for AusTender, and likewise Northern Territory digital platforms as well. So as I said, all of these are free of charge. The tendering process across Australia is pretty similar, and the process of procurement and tendering is pretty much standard across the Western world. So go and register for those websites free of charge and just get an idea as to what the tender opportunities are available to you. So once you've registered for those websites, you will start to receive notification of tenders that match your criteria, and this is where you can get an opportunity to have a look at a tender document to see if it's something that you would like to put a bid on. So download the documentation from the buyer website, so Tenders WA. Again, the downloading the documentation is free of charge, and it generally it'll have all the documents about the tenders, so the scope of works, the tender document, any plans or drawings, you know, schedules that you have to complete. Everything that you need to make an informed bid will included in that in those tender documents. And you know, depending on the size of the tender and the dollar value and the like, there can be quite a large number of documents that you'll have to read through to get an understanding of what the tender is chasing. So review the document. So we call it a request. So that's a term that you're likely to hear, which is a catch-all request for tender, proposal, quote, or whatever. So download the documentation, have a look at the scope of works or the specifications, and determine what the buyer is looking to buy. Have a look at the selection criteria that you must meet. Read the rules around the tender process. As I said, it's very rule-based. Look at things like pre-qualification requirements, which I'll talk about, the compliance criteria, but also, what is the due date and time? What's the delivery method? What are some of the other rules that may apply to the tender? So tendering is very much rule-based because they need to make sure that every bid is considered in the same open and transparent manner. Have a look at who the buyer is, the government agency or industry organisation. What are they trying to achieve through the tender process? And what are they? So you need to understand who the buyer is, the nature of the organisation, but also what they're looking to buy. And also the tender document will give you an idea as to the type of organisation they're looking to engage. And that would be clearly outlined in the document, and also would form part of any possible pre-qualification. So you need to satisfy yourself that you fit within those parameters that the buyer is looking for in terms of an organisation. If you're not sure of anything, you've read through the document, you need some clarification or something, that you are allowed to ring the organisation and seek that clarification or ask any questions. There will be contact details of people that you can call to do that. And more often than not, they'll want you to put that in writing via email, but you can ask questions if you're not sure. Sometimes the tender will have a requirement for a briefing session. And what this is basically they'll get all the prospective suppliers for that tender to a meeting where they'll go through information about the tender. There might be some more information that they're going to provide. They might clarify some aspects or talk about the general nature of the tender and what they're trying to achieve. From your point of view, it gives you an opportunity to ask questions, receive additional information, view the location. So facilities type contracts, say cleaning, for example, they often have a briefing session where they want the cleaners to, prospective cleaning companies to visit the buildings that they're going to clean. And the other thing too, it gives you an opportunity to see who your likely competitors are as well. Now, these briefing sessions, again, as part of the rules of the tendering, they may be mandatory, which means that you must attend, and that'll be a pre-qualification requirement. So if you don't attend a mandatory briefing session, then your bid's not going to be considered, regardless of how good it is, because you've not met the pre-qualification requirement. If it's non-mandatory, it's optional, up to you. I would encourage you to go, because it does give you an opportunity to ask questions, meet the selection panel, obtain additional information, and see who your competitors are. So definitely go to briefing sessions. Analyse the competition. So who else is likely to bid? Is this a new contract, or is there an existing supplier and the contract has come to an end and they're just going to market again? Understand who your competitors are, because that'll give you an idea as to where you need to be at to win the tender. Who are you competing against? And the other point too is look at whether there's opportunities for you to collaborate with other businesses. And I know myself, I've done this and actually won work and through attending briefing sessions as well. So there's been a couple of contracts that I've looked at, or tenders that I've looked at, and I thought, well, I've only got sort of 60% of the skill set. So I've gone and found other consultants that can plug those gaps, and we've been able to win a tender through collaboration. And in relation to attending briefing sessions, I've been able to find collaboration partners there. So Business Station is a good example for me, because when the the program was first tendered back in 2014, I went to the briefing session. It was non-mandatory. I was interested in putting in a bid with my other consultants that I had. And I went to the briefing session, walked away from there looking at my competitors and thought I'm not going to be able to compete with them. So I decided not to put in a bid. But then I contacted the CEO of Business Station and said, who I'd met at the briefing session, and said, look, I'm not going to put in a bid, but would you be interested in having me and my other consultant at the time come in as your key personnel? And we met and she agreed, and Business Station won the tender, and here I am, 7 years later, still delivering advisory sessions for them. So it's been a good relationship, but I met them through a briefing session and through considering collaboration opportunities. So what are the key factors to winning a tender? There's essentially 4. Positioning is the first one. So understanding the buyer, the opportunity in the marketplace. So you need to do your research on the organisation that's tendering, what they're trying to achieve through the tender opportunity, and what opportunities that presents to yourself. The compliance side of it, so as I said, tendering is very rules-based, so they will ask you a range of questions that they will use to determine your compliance with the tender. So compliance is also completing the tender document in the manner in which they require you to. So answering all questions, supplying all the information that they ask for, including attachments if they ask for, delivering it by the due date and time, meeting the pre-qualification requirements. They're the sort of compliance things that they're going to be looking for, and you need to tick all those boxes. Persuasion, well, it's a marketing exercise. You're trying to convince them to give you a job. And through a tender process, at the closing date and time, there might be a dozen submissions that the selection panel have to review in order to select a preferred supplier. So you need to provide a compelling story and reason to select you. So it's no different to any other marketing that you do. And price, so having the right value strategy. So getting an understanding of where your price is value for money for the organisation. And you need to do your research. You would have your own sort of price basis and mechanisms that you use to develop a price. But do your research. I mean, local government, for example, I mean, I've done this. I put in a bid for a strategic plan consultancy, and I was working on my price, and I thought, well, I'll go to the local government website and download their budget for the financial year, and I did that, and I found a line item in the budget, strategic plan consultancy, $20,000. So that was a price that I went in at. So do your research. I mean, they're not going to tell you the price generally, or the budget. Some do. I mean, I have had tenders where, say, a local government has received a grant and they've specified what the contract value would be, but by and large, the price details aren't provided. You need to come up with a price, and then they will assess your price against the budget. So you generally need all 4 of those key factors to win a tender. The other thing that you need to ask yourself is, are you as an organisation tender ready? So you need to go through and assess your business against the tender requirements to see whether you can meet them. So what I encourage my clients to do is just to sort of work through these questions over the next few slides and just jot down some dot points as to whether they're able to meet these or how they would go about answering these types of questions, because these are the sort of things that the buyer is looking for. So, how are you going to address their aims and objectives? How are you going to solve their problem? What ways can you compete on cost? What sort of skills and expertise make your business stand out? How do you respond quickly to events and carry out decision making? Your relationship building, your flexibility as an organisation, And the last dot point there, will the buyer have any concerns about my business? So this is looking at your credibility. Because what the buyer is looking for in an organisation is one that can deliver what they want, when they want it, at a price that they're prepared to pay, and in assessing whether they can do all those three, are you a credible organisation? Do you have, the right sort of policies, procedures, history of completing similar work, key, qualified and skilled key personnel, good systems and procedures, business continuity, your organisational structure. They're the sort, your financial security, information security management, safety management. They're all the things that they're going to look for to determine your organisational capacity to really be able to deliver what they want and when they want it. Do you have any innovative products or services that could be of value to the buyer? Your methodology for delivering the tender outcomes. Outline how the buyer will benefit from your service or products, and identify any risks in the supply and develop a mitigation strategy. So you can see, if you can just go through and answer, a few dot points on how you would go about answering this, or what current systems, procedures, and the like that you have in place, and that it'll help you plan for your first tender. Because the first tender that you're going to do is probably the most time and cost resource intensive. So the more pre-planning and understanding you can get of how you actually run your business is going to be useful, because they're the questions that you're going to get, which we'll go through a bit later on. So, get details of referees, any testimonials and like, and, identify any value add opportunities as well. Okay, the organisation is seeking to buy this, but is there something that you can add value to that's going to perhaps deliver them a cost saving or a better outcome than what's initially thought? And in doing so, having answered all those sort of questions, come up with what we call win themes. So, get an understanding of your organisational strengths and weaknesses, but win themes are really the special factors that will persuade the buyer to purchase your goods and services and to engage you as a contractor. That's really what it's about. What's so good about your business? Why should I pick you? I'm on the selection panel. I'm reading 12 other tender submissions. What are the special factors about your business that would stand out and convince me to give you the job? And once you've gone through all that process of determining whether you're tender ready, you've read the documentation, you're across the rules and the requirements of the tender, then consider whether to put in an actual bid, because not every tender that you come across is going to be suitable for you. So you need to go through that exercise, because you might see a heading on, say, tenders WA and a brief overview of what the tender is, and you think, well, that looks all right. I'll go and download the documentation. But then when you start reading through it and looking at what's required, you suddenly realise that it's not a tender that you can actually bid on. So go through that exercise, look at your financial capacity, resources to deliver the project. Is the tender consistent with your strategic direction of the business? Do you need to engage resources to help you complete the tender document? And importantly, do you meet the pre-qualification requirements? So the pre-qualification requirements are basically you must have. And if you don't have it, then your bid's not going to be considered. So, for example, if the briefing session is a mandatory briefing session, then if you don't attend, then you haven't met that pre-qualification requirement. It may require you to have a certain license. So if it's a construction type tender that's engaging electricians, for example, you may need to have certain licenses around that. And if you don't have those licenses, then your bid won't be considered. So that's why it's important first thing is to read the pre-qualification requirement. And if you can't meet it, you've either got to meet it before the tender closes, or there's no point putting in a bid. So make that decision as soon as possible. So generally you'll get 3 to 4 weeks to complete your tender submission. So don't wait until the last minute to make that decision. So you found a tender that you want to put in a bid for, and now we get down to the fun part of sitting down and writing your tender submission. So when you look at it, it's almost a project in itself. You've got an opening date and time. So you download the tender documentation, you go through that go, no-go analysis. Then you've got, say, 3 weeks to complete the document. It's got to be delivered by Friday at 2 p.m. So, during that period, you've got to get a lot of information together to help put together the submission. So treat it as a project in itself, and that sort of project approach, very methodical in terms of gathering your information, liaising with key personnel. I mean, it could just be you if you're a single person consultant or business, but you need to identify who and what needs to have input into your tender submission. So the development of the strategy around the tender, the design and presentation, who's going to write the document and collate all the information. You need to engage with subject matter experts. So there might be some legal issues in there that you might need to speak to someone about. You do your bid estimating and your pricing. So you need to identify these, and importantly, gather your information early in the process. So you might have to go to an external supplier yourself to get information about pricing to help inform your price for the tender. So don't wait until the last minute to do that. Identify all those internal and external inputs early in the first week, and then get that information as soon as you can. You don't want to be rushing around on the day that the tender's due, still getting information to prepare your bid. So the sort of information that you're going to need for a tender, and it's standard across all tenders, so you might want to set up a file with all this information in it. So all your corporate details, so ABN and all that sort of stuff. Get details of your insurances, so your certificates of currency, all your ASIC and business name registration. Speak to your referees. If you can get some written testimonials, great. You can include brochures and marketing literature if you think that's going to help your bid. If you've got any certifications, licenses or permits, then have a record of those, because you may be asked to include them as an attachment in your bid. Sort out your CV and make sure that that's up to date for yourself and any other key personnel that are going to be involved with the bid. And then put together some case studies and methodologies. So when I talk about case studies, one of the questions you're going to get in the tender is, around, demonstrated history of completing similar work. So the way that you answer that is by preparing a case study of a job that you've done previously that's similar to this tender. So I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So you'll need to complete the tender requirements, so that it's pretty much structured in the corporate details. So they need to get an understanding of who the legal entity is and who the contract's going to be with. The pre-qualification requirements. Now, not every tender is going to have a pre-qualification requirement, but these are the things that you must have or done in order to be considered. The compliance requirements. So generally a yes, no answer. And I'll talk about these in a little bit more detail later, but then the selection criteria. So that's the nuts and bolts of it. That's where you go and talk about how you can actually deliver the tender itself, the buyer's scope of works or specification, and then the price criteria. So yeah, there'll be a schedule that you'll have to complete outlining your price. Now, during the course of that opening period, they may issue, the buyer may issue additional information or responses to questions being asked by other prospective tenderers. Now, once you download your documentation, say from Tenders WA, your email will be automatically obtained by the agency. And if there are any additional information released, then you'll receive an email with that advice, and you'll need to go back to the Tenders WA website or the relevant state government website to download the information. So the types of addendums that could be issued would be, say, after a briefing session, they'll respond to all the questions that were asked. An individual prospective tenderer may ask a question, and then they'll release the information and answer to all the prospective bidders. There could be some additional information come to hand about the tender itself. I've been in situations where they've extended the deadline by a week or so, so they've released an addendum advising you of that. So it's very important that you do read that information, because it could impact how you respond to the tender and also how you're going to price the tender as well. So in terms of presentation and structure, so in writing your document, there generally be a template that you have to fill out. So set out your document structure in the same logical sequence as that template. Use the headings that they use as your headings. You need to make it simple and easy for the reader to be able to find the information that they need to have to make an informed decision on who should be the supplier. As I said, as someone on the selection panel, I'm not just reading your document, I'm reading the other 10, 20, however many might come in. So you need to make it easy for me to read and find the information that I need to make an informed decision on whether I should give you the contract or not. So use simple language, avoid waffle and repetition, persuasive techniques, so articulate your key messages well. As I said, it is a marketing exercise, so you do need to convince me to give you the work. So, and don't just write page and page after of text. Break it up. If you can explain something by using a graph or a table or a photo, use charts or diagrams. Bullet points are good. Headings, subheadings, short paragraphs, flow charts. Just break it up. There are other ways that you can send a message other than writing, page after page of text. Include a table of contents and number the pages. If you're having sections, if you've got attachments, reference where the attachments are, so it's easy for me to go and locate them. And by preparing your document in this way, well structured, clearly defined and short, sharp, to the point answers, well presented, then it's going to help me have confidence in your ability to be able to deliver the work, because I've been able to get the answers that I need to make that decision. One thing that I do is just, a potential, a cover letter or an executive summary, just a brief introduction to your business, summarise your win themes. So, our capacity to deliver this work is demonstrated by history of completing similar projects, qualified and experienced staff, well-maintained plant and equipment, that type of thing. The administrative aspects of the tender, so just perhaps an outline of the structure of your document and where certain attachments are. Make a personal commitment to, making the supply of service or product a success. Include your contact details and have it signed by the most senior person in your organisation. And before you submit the document, do a proofread, review it several times, maybe get an independent person to have a look at it, someone that hasn't been involved in writing the document. You need to ask yourself, are there strong win themes, and have these been reinforced throughout the submission? Does it answer all the questions? Is the depth of information appropriate to the weighting? So, you know, in terms of the selection criteria, you might get, say, 5 questions. One question's worth 10%, another's worth 20, or whatever. So just look at those weightings. Is it logical, easy to follow and direct? So, you know, is it easy for me to read? And is it internally consistent, technically correct? So, you know, you're not saying one thing on one page and perhaps contradicting yourself to the and on another page. You know, if you need to include, you know, detailed, you know, designs or other technical documentation, make sure that it's actually correct and you're using the latest version. And importantly, does it have all the information required? So have you included all the attachments that they've asked for? If they ask for copies of certificates of currency for your insurance, have you included those in it? So it's all part of the rules and that compliance requirement around answering or responding to the bid in the form and the manner that they require. And then once you've done all that, you're ready to package and deliver the tender. So you know, the tenders mostly these days are uploaded through the website that you download the document to, so Tenders WA or one of the state portals or AusTender. So understand the digital platform requirements for uploading the documentation. So, I mean, they might have some requirements around the file size, how many documents you can upload, and how you actually go about doing that. Submit the tender as per the buyer's requirements. So, yeah, so that, you know, they may require certain documentation to be attached, but also importantly, deliver it by the closing date and time. So if it closes at 2 o'clock on Friday, well, if you go to upload it at 2:05, well, you're not even going to get an opportunity to do that because the website will close down for that particular tender. So yeah, the last thing you want to be doing is rushing around on the day that's due. I always aim to try and get it done the day before. Yeah, don't leave it to the last minute. And what will happen is that once you upload it, you'll get an automatically generated delivery receipt saying that, you know, you uploaded the document on this date and time. So that's your evidence. It's very rare, but it's still, on occasions, you might get a situation where they do want paper copies, and you have to physically deliver it to the tender box. I did one of those a couple of years ago. So again, the buying rules will generally specify, you know, 3 copies, 1 marked original, the other 2 marked copy, delivered in a sealed envelope to such and such an address by such and such a time. So again, the tender document will outline the rules around the delivery of documentation. So how will tenders be assessed? Well, you've done your job and you've submitted your tender by the due date and time. So now it's up to people like me to go about and do my job. So tenders are assessed against the criteria. So the selection criteria, the compliance criteria, and the pre-qualification criteria, and the price. So in looking at your submission, it'll be analysis of the strengths and weaknesses of that submission. I'll be looking to see whether you understand the qualitative requirement, which, you know, the selection. So have you been able to effectively answer questions around your capacity to deliver the tender? And then it'll also be based on the level of confidence that each panel member, because generally with these selection panels, it's made up of 2 or more people. So each panel member will assess the documentation individually, give it a point score. Each question, then come together in a meeting and determine, based on that, what the preferred score should be for each bid, and then rank those from highest to lowest, and then go about determining a preferred supplier. So we need to be confident in your ability to meet the selection criteria and the scope of works. So the success of your bid will be determined by how well you address the selection criteria, and you must adhere to the requirements of the tender to meet the criteria to increase your chance of winning. So going back to those 4 key factors, that we talked about earlier on in terms of positioning, persuasion, compliance, and price. So the compliance criteria, so the first stage will be the pre-qualification. Have you met that? Yes or no? If no, then your bid won't be considered. So that'll be the first thing. Then we'll look at things like conditions of participation. So have you delivered it by the due date and time? Have you included all the information that you've been asked to include? Have you answered all the questions? Have you agreed to the contract? That type of thing. Then we'll do due diligence on your financial security. So, for example, in WA, for example, local government, more often than not, you'll get a question around, are you able to pay all your debts when they fall due? They may require you to include a couple of years of profit and loss statements, obtain a reference from your bank or accountant attesting to your financial security. I mean, they don't want to put you on a 3-year contract and find that you go broke halfway through it and can't fulfill the contract. So these questions generally require an answer, a yes or no answer. Where a no answer is given, provide an explanation. You may not need to comply with every detail of every requirement, but pre-qualification do. A good example of that is insurance, where the tender may specify $20 million public liability, for example, but you've only got 10 million. So you don't technically comply with the requirements of the tender, but you can go on and say that if you're successfully winning the bid, you will take out the additional insurance, and you may want to include a letter from your insurance company stating that they would be prepared to give you the additional insurance if you were to win the tender. So the selection criteria, so the types of questions that you're going to get in here are around your organisational capacity to deliver the goods or services. So that's talking about how you actually manage your business and the management processes and procedures and policies that you have in place to manage your business and deliver the supply of goods and services to the market. So, your safety management, quality management, all that sort of thing, which I'll touch on a bit later. You're going to get a question around your experience and qualifications of key personnel. So that's why it's important to have some responses around that. Identify who's going to work on the contract, and make sure that their CVs are up to date. You'll get a question on your history of completing similar projects or supply of products. So this is where you can develop some case studies on how you went about something. So take a project that you've worked on that's similar to the tender, outline who the client was, what the scope of works was, how you went about delivering that scope of works, were there any issues or challenges that cropped up during the project, how did you address those, and what was the eventual outcome for the client. Did you deliver it on time, on budget? Did you save them some money? Just something that demonstrates that you've got a history of completing work similar to the tender. You need to demonstrate that you understand the requirements of the scope. So there will be a question asking you to outline your understanding of that. And then you may need to put together your methodology for delivering the supply. So from the date you receive the purchase order to the date that you deliver the product or service, what is the process step by step that you're going to go through to deliver that, and how you're going to measure the success of that. So they're the most common questions that you're going to get. So you need to develop some pretty good answers around that, because this is the persuasion component. The selection criteria is, the questions may be weighted, as I mentioned, but these are the things that we're going to assess you on, and we're going to sit there individually as panel members. We're going to read through your bid, and we're going to give you a point score of 0 to 9 based on, or 10 based on the answers that you're given. And then we'll do that as individual panel members, and then we'll meet up as a team and come up with a group score, and then rank the suppliers from highest score to lowest to determine who the preferred supplier is going to be. And then once we've done that, then we're going to match it up with the price. So we'll then we'll take the highest point scoring bid, and then we'll have a look at their price. So yeah, value for money. I mean, they do say in the tender, lowest price not necessarily accepted, and that is true. There's many times when they don't accept the lowest price because the supplier hasn't convinced them in their tender submission that they're a credible enough organisation to be able to deliver what they want when they want it. So, but they will try and get the cheapest compliant decision. So yes, if they can get the lowest price, they will. So you need to demonstrate why your price will deliver value for money. And looking at the price basis, it could be a schedule of rates, lump sum, time payment, hourly rate, or the like, and there will be a schedule that you'll need to complete. So it's very important to complete your price in accordance with that schedule, because it makes it easier for us on the panel to match up all the prices against each other. There'll probably be a template that you'll need to fill out. In determining your price, some things might come into play, local content and regional price preferences. So if the tender is for the supply of goods and services in regional areas, there may be a price preference given to businesses within that region. So if you're based in the capital city, you might be competing with businesses based within that region that would be given a price preference, as it could be a 10% discount or something like that. Government has various buy local policies. In WA, for example, we've got industry participation strategy. So depending on the dollar value, it's generally over 20 million, you might have to prepare an industry participation plan. And then there's also requirements around Aboriginal and disability service providers. So within WA, for example, if the supply's over or under $250,000, they can go straight to an Aboriginal business without having to go to tender, or likewise a disability service provider as well. So just have a look again. These sort of things will be specified in the rules of the tender. So having gone through all that, we then determine who the preferred supplier is, and we offer them a contract. And hopefully that's you, and you'll get a phone call, and then they'll go through the process. There might be some other requirements built into it, so they might determine a short list of suppliers, and then they'll get those shortlisted suppliers to come in and give a presentation on their bid. Again, that sort of thing. And then if that happens, then they'll receive the presentations, and then they'll go away and look at their scoring system to see if there's any amendments that are needed, and then award a contract. So again, the tender document will outline the rules around all that. So if successful, you'll negotiate the contract and get on with the job. If unsuccessful, certainly in government, you'll be advised of the success of the outcome and possibly who the successful supplier is. But importantly, I'd encourage you to seek feedback on your submission. You are entitled to seek feedback, and that will assist you in further future tenders. So do seek feedback. So that's the tender process. What I just want to touch on now is how you can demonstrate your organisational capacity. And here I talk about management systems, so sort of quality, environment, safety, and the like, because you will get questions about this in the tender. So all tenders are going to ask questions on your capacity to deliver the goods and services. Having management systems in place is critical to demonstrating that. It could be a pre-qualification requirement to have a ISO 9001 quality management system certified. It's rare, but they'll certainly ask you a question, do you have a system consistent with these standards? And having good management systems and procedures is good for, it's good business, it's good to help you manage your business. So The types of management systems that you're going to see mentioned in tenders: quality management, so you know, how the process of you delivering your goods and services to the market. Environmental management, so how does your business interact with the natural environment? So, you know, a construction contract, for example, they might have questions around how you're going to manage on-site waste, how you're going to manage noise and dust, and the traffic and that type of thing. So they're the types of questions that you might get. Safety management. Now, I know in local government they're very big on this, and you may very well get a survey on your safety management system that you have to fill out. And I've just done some work with a company developing a new safety management system for the purpose of managing their own business, but also assisting them to win a future tender. And the other thing that's increasingly important too is information security management. So looking at your IT security and managing business, client and personal information. So you might get some questions around governance, so codes of conduct and the like. Again, this is all about demonstrating your organisational capacity and, you know, are you a safe pair of hands? And you'll recall earlier I asked the question, you know, would there be any concerns that I would have as someone on the selection panel about engaging you? And by demonstrating that you have these robust management policies and procedures in place and that there is evidence of implementation, then that's going to satisfy those concerns and remove any doubts that I might have as to your organisational capacity. So risk management, business continuity. So, you know, and for smaller businesses, this is important as well. I mean, for a smaller business like myself, they're going to want to know backup arrangements. You know, what happens if I'm halfway through a project and I come down ill? How is the project going to continue? So do I have backup personnel that can step in? Plant and equipment, you know, say you're a cleaning company and you know, you're halfway through a strip and seal job of a floor and your polisher breaks down. You know, do you have backup machinery? Is there going to be a delay in delivering the services? And what's the impact of delays? So you need to be able to demonstrate to them that no matter what the circumstance, you're still going to be able to deliver the supply of goods and services when they want it and when they need it to be delivered. HR, so how you recruit, select and induct and manage your employees, and your financial policies and procedures. So again, you know, good internal controls, you know, satisfying them that you are financially secure. Protecting business information is becoming increasingly important. I do have a webinar later on today about this. So you need to demonstrate that you've got good cyber security and information security management in place, because record keeping and document control is important in government because it is governed by certain legislation. So Privacy Act, you know, particularly in the case of where you collect personal information about your customers, and government, whether state, federal or local, have to comply with things like the State Records Act and the Freedom of Information Act. So you may get some questions around your record keeping to ensure that the government agency can fulfil its statutory requirements as well. So these are a couple of things that you just might want to take away with you from this exercise. So, you know, go away and identify some win themes, look at some business continuity measures that you can put in place, and go to the tender portal and download a tender, that any tender document that you can see that's relevant to your business, and have a look at how it's structured. So just there's a couple of exercises that you can take away from this session. So in conclusion then, tendering is a great way to earn new business. I think I've won tenders and they've been good projects and good dollars attached to them. But the process of writing your tender can be time and resource intensive. So I think the more that you can plan and develop model answers and case studies and get all your information together, then the easier it's going to be. Should be one component of your business development and marketing strategy. So, keep doing all the other things that you do to get work. Pick the right tenders that you think you can win. So go through that, that exercise and read through the documentation. Attend any briefing sessions, regardless of whether they're mandatory or not, because you never know who you might meet there and how you end up getting work. So treat the process as a project and manage people resources accordingly so you can deliver it by the due date and time, and develop win themes and reinforce these throughout the submission. So, start thinking about these things now. Why should I pick your business instead of someone else's? Develop your policies and procedures. Now, it's all about scale. I mean, if you're a small business, you're not going to have policies and procedures a big business would have. But, if you can demonstrate some, simple procedures around safety, environment, quality, information security, business continuity, then, that would satisfy the tender requirements. Be particular about presentation and structure, so make it easy for me to read, because as I said, I'm not just reading your document. Undertake a critical review of the submission, so proofread and edit, and deliver it by the due date and time, otherwise you've wasted a lot of time. So that's important. So that's it for this presentation. Thank you for your participation. If you have any questions, fire away. Otherwise, thank you for attending. I am running another webinar at 10 o'clock on business grants today at Perth time. 12 o'clock, I've got one on business information, protecting business information. So that's cybersecurity, information security. And at 2 o'clock, I've got one on safety management. So if you want to register for those, please do so. If you can't make the live session, you can access the recording, and I will send you a copy of the presentation. But you won't win a tender if you can't demonstrate good policies and procedures around those management systems. So it's very important that you are across what they mean, and that you can actually deliver those. So thank you for attending, and we'll go from there.